So as we deal with rising prices of food, electricity and fuel, those living on or below the breadline are facing increasing hardship. It's estimated over 6.5 million people in South Africa are going to bed hungry at night, and despite government's 350 rand a month grant for the social relief of distress, there's still shocking stories of deprivation. Let's speak now to the Deputy Director General for Comprehensive Social Security in the Department of Social Development, Brenda Sibeko. Ms. Sibeko, thank you so much for joining us. Talk to me about the hunger situation in South Africa, because I would imagine that is uppermost in the minds of people in the Social Development Department. What are the latest stats on how many people are food insecure, going hungry to bed?
I have looked at the most recent numbers. But when we were doing the number crunching for the 350 grant, one of the things that we found was estimations that say that people who have income below the food poverty line of 624 was around 18 million people. That's a huge number of people, obviously, and that statistic is about a year old, which means that now that the food prices have gone up, the numbers of people who are unable to buy adequate food for themselves will be higher than that. And so it's a real concern for us as a Department of Social Development. So we are doing quite a lot of work in terms of linking people to not only making sure that we're giving the 350 grant, which is not even adequate to really buy a basket of food for people, but also to try to ensure that other programs that we have, such as our food security program, where people are provided with food in community nutrition centers, that we begin to make sure that we increase the number of people that are able to access those, on top of the financial provisions that we are making. But we are also looking at making sure that those people who are getting the 350 grant are also exposed or linked to other economic opportunities, like the programs that other government departments are doing, the public works program, so that they can at least earn a bit more than the 350 grant. People who are skilled in some ways also to be able to get opportunities to get training, and also to be assisted even in the small businesses sector to be able to start some sort of small business for themselves. So from government's perspective, I think, Hanley, you've caught me a bit off by surprise by asking the latest statistics. I haven't got them into my head yet. I still need to do that. But there's a lot of work that we are doing, expecting that even as the numbers change and grow, the relief that we are offering will not be adequate to deal with the full extent of hunger in the country. So it's a compendium of social protection benefits that government needs to put into place beyond just the 350 grant, to make sure that people in the long term are able to survive and are able to weather the storm that we are currently having in the economy at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's, as you say, 350 is nowhere near enough, but it's better than not having anything at all.
Exactly.
It is a very difficult time. Are you concerned that the hunger crisis is worsening? And I'm asking that because we know that the cost of items is going up. Have you had any latest research that suggests, yes, indeed, more and more people are going hungry nowadays? Or has the 350 grant mitigated a lot of that?
It has mitigated, Hanley, to a large extent. And what we are trying to do now is also to make sure that you see, one of the things that we have done, because we realized when we got the budget at the beginning of the year, the financial year, that we were not going to cover necessarily the same number of people that we had been covering in the second iteration of the grant. By the end of March of this year, we were covering 10.9 million people. And we realized that now that the allocation we have is for 10.5 million, we were forced in order to stay within the budget, to change some of the regulations that we had before. So we found that now the numbers that we are covering are much lower. So one of the things that we are doing is to actually increase the income threshold that we are doing, so that we can give more people access to the money. So in the current year, we find that we have paid around 5.2 million people who qualified in the current iteration, the new iteration that we've got, because we had reduced the means test so drastically. We had put the means test as 350 rand. So what we want to do in order to increase the number of people, to at least reach the 10 million people that are clearly struggling, is to increase that level of income test that we're doing, so that everyone who is at least below the 624 rand, which is the food poverty line income test, can at least be able to get the 350. And so that we can also make that contribution to reducing hunger.
Let me understand the rules, because I think there's been a lot of confusion and a bit of an outcry. You can qualify for this 350 rand a month grant if you earn 624 rand or less a month. Is that correct?
That's what we are doing now. That's the new regulation we are proposing. Before, we had reduced that level of income to 350 rand, mostly because our estimations suggested that we would go over the budget if we set it at the food poverty line of 624. It's only now that we are going to introduce that. We have just published the regulations to enable us to be able to cover more people. So now the income test is going to go up from 350 to 624, which means that everyone who earns less than 624 or has an income flow into their account of less than 624 will be able to access the 350 grant going forward.
All right, so that is going to be welcome news. Talk to me about when we're going to make this permanent, because I think it lasts until March next year at the moment. We know times are tight, but how can we justify not continuing this when we know people are literally still starving to death in our country?
Exactly. I think it will be very difficult to justify. So what the department is doing now is looking at ways and means, because what we're looking for is to provide a longer-term basic income support. We want to use this 350 grant as a kind of a basis for providing a more long-term benefit to people within that age group of 18 to 59. And the way we are doing that is saying the lessons we are learning now in implementing the 350 grant, we are getting a sense of what sort of income level people are at. We are getting a sense of what systems and mechanisms and processes we should be putting into place to implement it. And we are also learning how to make sure that there's less leakage, because of course, as soon as more people who do not deserve it access it, then it means fewer people who actually do need it are getting it. So as we get our systems right from the learning curve we've had over the past 2 years, we are wanting to then motivate. Of course, we have to motivate and argue and fight for the budget, frankly, with the rest of the government departments in the country, to motivate for us to be able to extend it beyond the current financial year. What we are hoping to do is get it extended to the next year and the next year while we write a more permanent legislation. Remember, currently what we are doing is we are basing it on a temporary regulation, because the grant allocation is only for a year. But what we want to do is actually write the legislation that then makes it a more permanent benefit. Of course, it has not been approved yet. We're hoping that it can get approved. But while we are waiting for the approval processes and the actual writing of the legislation and those sorts of processes that need to be done, they take quite a long time. We are wanting for the grant at least to be extended for another year, and if we are not done with the law in the next year, for it to also be extended for basically the next 3 years. And of course, one of the things we are also doing is getting a better handle of the numbers. So if feasible at all, we will also try to ask government to increase the value of the grant so that people are getting a much higher benefit than the 350, understanding, of course, that given that the food poverty is so high, we need to be giving people a bit more money than
the food poverty line is at 624, as you've explained. Anyone earning less than that can qualify for this grant, which, as you're explaining, you're hoping you can continue for a number of years. Very interesting work. Thank you very much, Deputy Director General for Comprehensive Social Security in the Department of Social Development, Brenda Sibeko.